Hey everyone, and welcome to our deep dive today. We're going to be checking out Shawn Achor's Ojeto Harvard de Ser Feliz.
Oh, yeah. Love that book.
It's a great one. I
Yeah.
mean, who doesn't want to be happy, right? But
Right.
this book goes way deeper than just, surface level stuff. It's like a whole
It does.
different way of looking at happiness and success and how they actually feed off each other.
Yeah.
Have you read it recently?
I have actually. Yeah, I revisited it just
for
before this deep dive to refresh my memory.
Perfect.
And
So you're ready.
I think it's a book that you can revisit many times.
Oh, totally. And the research is just mind-blowing.
Yeah.
It really makes you rethink some things.
It does.
So for those of you who haven't read it, this book dives into this idea of the benefit of happiness. So it's not just about feeling good. It's about how happiness can actually fuel our success in all areas of life.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that's so interesting about Achor's work is that he comes at it from this scientific perspective. He's not just saying think positive thoughts and everything will be great. He's actually got the data to back it up.
Yeah, he was at Harvard for years, right?
He was, yeah. He was a researcher there. And he's done all these studies with students and professionals all over the world.
I think one of the coolest things is how he compares these different groups of people to kind of illustrate his points. There's this one story in the book that really stuck with me where he compares students at Harvard, obviously, with students in Soweto, South Africa.
Oh, yeah, that's a powerful one.
And he talks about how in Soweto, the kids see homework as this privilege, this opportunity, to learn and grow.
Like a gift almost.
Totally.
Yeah.
Whereas a lot of the Harvard students were kind of homework, another burden.
It's so interesting, right? Because you would think that the Harvard students would be the ones who are super grateful for the opportunity to learn.
Yeah, you think they'd be the happiest.
Right.
But it just goes to show, perception is everything.
It really is. It's all about how we choose to see the world.
Yeah.
And that ties into this concept of the adaptation principle in happiness research.
So can you kind of explain that a bit more for our listeners who maybe haven't heard of that?
Sure. So the adaptation principle basically says that humans tend to adapt to their circumstances over time.
Yeah.
So whether something good happens to us or something bad happens to us, we kind of adjust to it. And our happiness level kind of goes back to our baseline.
Right. So it's we get a new car, we're super excited for a week, and then it's just our car.
Exactly. Or we get a promotion at work, we're thrilled for a little while, but then we just get used to it. And the same thing happens with negative experiences. We lose our job, we're devastated, but then over time we kind of adjust to that new reality.
Right.
So what Achor is saying is that this adaptation principle can work for us or against us. If we're constantly focusing on what's wrong or what we're lacking, we're actually training our brains to see the world through that lens.
Right. So if we're always focusing on I don't have enough money or I wish I had a bigger house, we're basically setting ourselves up to be unhappy.
Exactly. We're reinforcing that negative mindset.
And that totally reminds me of another thing Achor talks about in the book. It's this idea of the cult of the average.
Oh, yeah. That's a good one.
He's basically critiquing this tendency in psychology to focus on the average person, right?
Yeah.
And he's saying that this focus on the average might actually be holding us back from understanding what allows individuals to excel, to truly thrive. What do you think about that?
It's a really interesting point. I mean, if we're always comparing ourselves to the average part, we might be setting the bar too low for ourselves.
Yeah, it's we're aiming for mediocrity instead of striving for excellence.
And Achor's research seems to suggest that we should be focusing on the outliers, on the people who are doing extraordinary things. Because by studying them, we might be able to glean some insights into what allows them to achieve such remarkable results.
It's instead of asking what's wrong with people, let's ask what's right with people.
Exactly.
And one of the things that Achor really challenges is this idea that success leads to happiness. This whole idea that if we just work hard enough, if we achieve all our goals, then we'll finally be happy.
Right. It's that whole I'll be happy when mentality.
Exactly. I'll be happy when I get that promotion, when I buy that house, when I find that perfect partner.
And Achor flips that script. He says, no, it's actually the other way around. Happiness fuels success.
So he's saying that if we want to be successful, we need to prioritize our happiness first.
Yeah, and he's got some pretty compelling evidence to back that up. He's done all these studies that show that when people are happier, they're more productive, they're more creative, they're better problem solvers, they're even healthier.
So it's not just about feeling good, it's about actually performing better in all areas of life.
Exactly. Happiness is like this secret weapon that gives us this competitive edge.
That's amazing. So if we're buying into this idea that happiness is the key to success, how do we actually become happier in a way that sets us up for that success? Like,
hmm
does Acre offer any practical advice on how to actually boost our happiness levels?
He does. He provides a whole toolkit of techniques.
Yeah.
One that stands out to me is the Zorro circle.
What is that? I don't remember that one.
So it's this idea that when we're feeling overwhelmed or stuck, it's helpful to break down our goals into smaller, more manageable steps. And he uses this analogy to Zorro, the masked swordsman.
Oh, right.
So in the beginning, Zorro doesn't try to master all of sword fighting at once. He starts by practicing in a small circle, focusing on one specific move at a time.
So it's about starting small and building momentum.
Exactly. And as you get better, you gradually expand your circle, taking on bigger and bigger challenges.
So it's a way to avoid feeling overwhelmed and like build that sense of accomplishment.
Yeah, it's about creating those small wins that keep us motivated and moving forward.
And I think that's so important because sometimes when I'm facing a big project or goal, I get totally paralyzed by like the sheer size of it.
Right.
But if I break it down into smaller chunks, it feels much more manageable and I'm more likely to actually get started.
And another great technique that Achor talks about is the 20-second rule.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
Have you tried that one?
I have. It's so simple, but it's like surprisingly effective.
Yeah, it's all about making good habits easier to start and bad habits harder.
So can you kind of break that down for our listeners?
Sure. So Achor says that we often sabotage our own good intentions because we overestimate our willpower.
Totally. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm going to wake up at 6 a.m. and go for a run every day. And then I hit the snooze button 9 times.
Exactly. So the 20-second rule is about reducing the amount of activation energy it takes to start a good habit or to resist a bad one. So for example, if you want to start working out in the morning, you could lay out your workout clothes the night before. So they're right there, ready to go.
Right. So you're not like, oh, I got to go find my sneakers. Where's my sports bra?
Exactly. Or if you want to cut back on watching TV, you could hide the remote control so it takes an extra 20 seconds to actually turn on the TV.
So it's basically about like designing your environment for success.
Yeah, it's about making it easier to do the things you want to do and harder to do the things you don't want to do.
Brilliant. And he also talks about how happiness is not just this like individual pursuit. It's something that's influenced by our social connections.
Absolutely. He makes
Yeah.
this really interesting point about happiness being like a team sport.
Oh, yeah. I love the analogy he uses in the book about the football team. Can you explain that?
Sure. He talks about how in football, the offensive line, they don't get a lot of glory. They don't score touchdowns, but they play this crucial role in protecting the quarterback, enabling him to actually make those plays.
Yeah, they're like the unsung heroes.
Right. And Achor says that our social connections are like that offensive line. They provide support resilience, a sense of belonging, and all of that allows us to perform better, to thrive both individually and collectively.
So it's not just about me, me, me. It's about recognizing that our well-being is interconnected.
Exactly. We're all in this together.
Yeah.
And when we invest in those relationships, we're not just helping ourselves, we're helping everyone around us.
And he backs this up with some pretty fascinating research, right? Like that study about the London taxi drivers.
Oh, yeah, that's a classic example of brain plasticity. So these taxi drivers in London, they have to memorize this incredible complex map of the city.
I can't even imagine. Have you been to London?
I have. Yeah, those streets are crazy. It's like a maze.
And they're not allowed to use GPS, right? It's all memorized.
Right. They have to know all the streets and landmarks by heart. And what researchers found is that because of this intense mental workout, the hippocampus, which is the part of the brain that's involved in spatial memory, actually grew larger in these taxi drivers.
So their brains physically changed.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. And it shows that our brains are not fixed. They're adaptable. They can change and grow in response to our experiences.
So what Acre is saying is that if our brains can change in response to memorizing a map of London, they can also change in response to our thoughts and beliefs and behaviors.
Exactly. And that gives us this incredible power to shape our own brains for the better.
We're not just stuck with the brain we were born with. We can actually rewire it for happiness, success, resilience.
And it's not just about positive thinking or affirmations. It's about actually changing our behaviors, our habits, our environments to create those neural pathways that support our well-being.
So it's like we're not just victims of our circumstances, we're architects of our own minds.
Exactly. And,
Yeah.
Another great example of this is the story of Roger Bannister, the first runner to break the 4-minute mile barrier.
Oh, yeah, that's such a powerful story. So, before Bannister did it, everyone thought it was physically impossible for a human to run a mile in under 4
It
minutes.
was like this mythical barrier.
And then Bannister came along and smashed it.
Yeah, and what's so fascinating is that once Bannister showed it was possible, suddenly other runners started breaking the 4-minute mile barrier too.
So, it was like a mental barrier more than a physical one.
In a way, yes. Once people saw that it was possible, they started to believe that they could do it too. And that belief made all the difference.
It's like seeing is believing. It opens up possibilities that we might have never thought possible before.
And that's what Achor's trying to do with his work. He's trying to show people what's possible when it comes to happiness and success. He's challenging those limiting beliefs that hold us back.
Right, like, oh, I could never start my own business, or I'm not creative enough to write a book, or I'm too old to learn a new language.
Exactly. All of those are just stories that we tell ourselves. And Achor is saying, hey, let's rewrite those stories. Let's open ourselves up to the possibility that we can achieve more than we ever thought possible.
And he also uses this really engaging story about the okapi, that animal that looks like a zebra-giraffe hybrid.
Oh, yeah, I love that story. So for years, people thought the okapi was just a myth, like a unicorn or a griffin.
Yeah, it sounds like something out of a fantasy novel.
But then in the early 1900s, someone actually discovered an okapi in the wild in Africa.
And suddenly this mythical creature became real.
Exactly. And Achor uses this story to illustrate the power of preconceptions.
How so?
He's saying that sometimes our beliefs or assumptions about the world, they can actually blind us to the truth. We might be so sure that something is impossible that we don't even bother to look for evidence to the contrary.
And that can prevent us from seeing opportunities that are right in front of us.
Exactly. It's like we're wearing these blinders that prevent us from seeing the full picture.
And I think that's such an important point because it reminds us to stay open to new possibilities, to question our assumptions, and to be willing to be surprised.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's about cultivating that childlike sense of wonder,
Mhm.
that curiosity that drives us to explore and learn and discover.
And he goes even further with this idea of the power of belief when he talks about the placebo effect.
Oh, yeah, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
So the placebo effect is this phenomenon where people experience a real improvement in their health or well-being, even though they've only been given a fake treatment, like a sugar pill.
So it's like the power of suggestion.
Exactly. It's the belief that they're receiving something that's going to help them that actually creates the positive outcome.
And he even talks about this thing called the reverse placebo effect.
That's even crazier. So the reverse placebo effect is when negative expectations actually lead to negative outcomes. Like someone might be told that they're allergic to something, and even if they're not, their body starts to react as if they are.
Wow, so our beliefs can actually manifest in our physical bodies?
It seems so. And Achor uses these examples to highlight the incredible power of our minds to shape our reality.
So it's not just about thinking positive thoughts, it's about actually believing that those positive thoughts are true. And that belief can have a real tangible impact on our lives.
Exactly. And, it's not just about individual health and well-being. Achor also talks about how these principles apply to success in all areas of life. He's worked with all sorts of organizations, from financial institutions to law firms to healthcare providers.
So how do these principles play out in the real world?
Well, he's found that even small boosts in happiness can have a big impact on performance, resilience, creativity, problem solving, even things like diagnostic accuracy in doctors.
That's amazing. So happier employees, happier doctors, happier everyone.
Yeah, and it's not just about creating a more pleasant work environment. It's about actually improving outcomes.
So it's not just fluffy stuff. It's actually good for business.
Exactly. And, one of the concepts that I think is so relatable is the Tetris effect.
Oh, yeah, I've definitely experienced that. So for those who haven't heard of it, can you explain what the Tetris effect is?
Yeah, so the Tetris effect is this phenomenon where after you've spent a lot of time doing a particular activity, you start to see patterns from that activity everywhere.
So like if you play Tetris for hours, you start to see those falling blocks in your everyday life.
Exactly. You might see them in buildings or furniture or even in the clouds. And Achor says that this same principle applies to our thoughts and behaviors.
So if we're constantly focusing on negative things, we're more likely to see negativity everywhere we go.
Yeah, our brains become primed to look for those patterns. But the good news is that the Tetris effect can work in a positive direction too.
So if we focus on gratitude, if we look for opportunities, if we practice kindness, we'll start to see more of those things in our lives.
Exactly. we can actually train our brains to look for the good, the positive, the beautiful. And that could have a profound impact on our happiness and well-being.
Yeah, I've noticed that in my own life. Like, if I make a conscious effort to focus on the things I'm grateful for, I actually start to feel happier and more content.
And it's not just about forcing ourselves to be positive all the time.
Right. It's not about denying the negative or pretending everything is perfect.
Yeah, it's about choosing to focus our attention on the things that uplift us, that inspire us, that make us feel good.
So it's about being intentional with our thoughts and our energy.
Exactly. And that's what Achor's work is all about. It's about giving us the tools to create a more positive and fulfilling life.
I love it. Well, this has been a great start to our deep dive into Ojedo Harvard de Cerfelice.
It has. I can't wait to explore some of these concepts in more depth in our next session.
Too.
We've only just scratched the surface.
Yeah, there's so much more to unpack. So for all of you listening out there, we'll be back soon with part 2 of our deep dive into Shawn Achor's work. And in the meantime, I encourage you to check out the book for yourself. You won't be disappointed.
Yeah, it's a great read. It might just change your life.
See you next time.
See ya. Picking up on this idea of how our thoughts can actually shape our reality. One of the things that really fascinated me in Achor's book was his discussion of mirror neurons.
Mirror neurons. Okay, remind me about those. I know we've all heard of them,
Right.
but give us like a little refresher.
Yeah, so basically mirror neurons are the specialized cells in our brains that fire not only when we perform an action, but also when we observe someone else doing that same action.
So it's like our brains are mirroring what we're seeing.
Exactly. It's like we're simulating the experience in our own minds.
Yeah.
And this has huge implications for how we connect with others, how we feel empathy, even how emotions and behaviors can spread.
That's so wild. It makes me think about those times when you can't help but yawn when you see someone else yawn,
Mm-hmm.
or how you cringe when you see someone get hurt.
Exactly. Those are classic examples of mirror neurons at work. And Achor's point is that this mirroring effect isn't limited to physical actions. It applies to emotions as well.
Wait, really?
Yeah, like when you see someone genuinely smiling, your mirror neurons fire as if you were smiling too. It actually triggers the release of feel-good chemicals in your brain.
So happiness is actually contagious. That's amazing.
It really is. But unfortunately, the flip side is true as well. If we're constantly around grumpy or stressed out people, our mirror neurons pick up on those cues and we start to feel stressed ourselves.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like you can just feel the energy shift in a room when someone walks in who's in a bad mood.
Exactly. And Achor highlights how this has huge implications for leaders. Their mood, their behavior, it all has a ripple effect throughout their team, their whole organization even.
So a leader who practices these happiness principles, who focuses on gratitude and connection, they're actually creating a more positive work environment for everyone.
Absolutely. And not only does that make it a more pleasant place to work, it actually boosts performance, creativity, and even those all-important bottom-line results.
That's awesome. It's like everyone wins.
Exactly. It's not just some woo-woo feel-good stuff. It's about creating a more thriving and successful environment for everyone.
This whole conversation has been so eye-opening. I'm definitely going to be more conscious of my own energy and the stories I'm telling myself and others.
Me too. It's a powerful reminder that we have more control over our happiness and our reality than we often realize. And that by choosing to focus on the positive, by cultivating gratitude and connection, we can create a ripple effect that benefits not just ourselves, but everyone around us.
It's like that quote, "Be the change you want to see in the world." But it's not just about some grand gesture. It starts with those small, everyday choices, those little shifts in perspective and behavior that add up to something much greater.
Absolutely. And remember, happiness isn't a destination. It's a journey. It's about embracing the process, learning from those inevitable challenges, and continuously striving to live a more fulfilling and meaningful life.
Well said. Achor's book, Ojedo Harvard de Cerfelice, really is a fantastic guide for that journey. It's packed with research, inspiring stories, and practical strategies that can help anyone unlock the power of happiness in their own life.
I highly recommend it to anyone who's ready to take that next step, to explore the science of happiness and discover how it can transform not just their own lives, but the lives of those around them.
It's a reminder that happiness isn't just some fleeting emotion. It's a choice. It's a practice. And it's a journey worth embarking on. So thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
Yeah, thanks for listening, everyone. We hope you found it inspiring and empowering. And remember, keep spreading that ripple of happiness, The world needs it now more than ever.
It's so interesting how Achor brings in all this like scientific research to back up these ideas about happiness and success. It's not just like fluffy self-help stuff.
Right. He's really grounding it in solid evidence.
Yeah.
And one of the things that really stood out to me was his discussion of the fulcrum and lever concept. It's this analogy that helps us understand how our mindset can amplify our potential.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Break it down for me.
So he uses this analogy to Archimedes' famous quote, "Give me a lever long enough and a fulcrum on which to place it, and I shall move the world. The length of the lever represents our potential, our inherent abilities and talents. The fulcrum represents our mindset, our beliefs, and attitudes."
So, by shifting our mindset, we're essentially adjusting the fulcrum, which can change the amount of leverage we have.
Exactly. And to illustrate this, Achor talks about this incredible study where they took a group of 75-year-old men and basically transported them back in time to 1959 for a week.
Wait, what? Time travel? How did they do that?
Well, not actual time travel, of course, but they created this incredibly immersive 1959 environment. They had period music playing, the decor was all from that era, even their IDs had photos of them from when they were 55. And they asked these men to act as if they were 55 again, fully immersed in that time period.
Wow. So, like a retirement home transformed into a 1950s time capsule?
Pretty much. And the results were amazing. These men showed significant improvements in physical strength, posture, cognitive function. Even their eyesight got better. It challenged this whole idea that aging is just this inevitable decline. Their mindset, their belief that they were younger and more capable, actually seemed to impact their physical reality.
That's incredible. It's like they tapped into a fountain of youth just by shifting their perception of time and their own capabilities.
It really highlights the power of belief. And Achor points out that our perception of time can be relative as well. He uses this example where he asks people to hum a song in their heads and then estimate how long they've been humming it.
I bet people's answers are all over the place. Time flies when you're having fun, right?
Exactly. Some people feel like they've been humming for minutes, others just a few seconds. It shows how our mindset shapes our experience of time. It makes me think about that study where they told hotel maids that their work was good exercise, and they actually lost weight and showed improved health markers, even though they weren't doing anything differently physically.
That's right. Their mindset shifted and their bodies followed suit. So how do we apply this fulcrum and lever concept to our own lives? How do we shift our mindset to leverage our full potential?
Achor emphasizes that it's about recognizing the power of our beliefs and understanding that reality is, to some extent, a matter of perception. We can choose to focus on our limitations, or we can choose to focus on possibilities.
So it's about actively cultivating a mindset that's geared toward growth and possibility. What are some practical ways we can do that?
Well, remember that Tetris effect we talked about earlier? Achor suggests we apply that same principle to mindset. Start small. Focus on a few positive things each day. A delicious meal, a kind gesture, a moment of joy. Keep a gratitude journal. Write down 3 good things that happened each day.
It's a way to make that shift from negativity to positivity more intentional.
Exactly. And surround yourself with positive influences, whether it's people, books, or media. Consciously limit exposure to negativity. Our brains are constantly being shaped by our experiences and thoughts.
So it's about creating an environment that supports a positive mindset. It's powerful to realize we have so much control over that.
And, it's not just about individual control. It's also about how we impact others. Achor emphasizes how contagious our emotions and behaviors are.
Okay, let's dive into that. How does our happiness spread to others?
Well, he tells a story about a time when he was going through a rough patch of back injury. He realized he'd been neglecting the principles he was teaching.
It's a good reminder that even the experts are human. What did he learn from that?
He realized knowledge isn't enough. We have to actually live these principles to truly benefit. And he also realized happiness wasn't just an individual effort. It was about investing in his social connections.
We are social creatures after all, right? Hardwired to connect. How does that social investment tie into this benefit of happiness?
Achor uses this great analogy of a football team. He points out that the offensive line, they might not score touchdowns, but they protect the quarterback, enabling the team to function.
So our relationships are like our personal offensive line.
Exactly. They provide a buffer against stress, help us navigate challenges, let us leverage our strengths. It's not just about surviving, it's about thriving together.
So how do we strengthen those connections, invest in that offensive line?
Achor emphasizes simple, meaningful interactions. Eye contact, asking genuine questions, offering support, celebrating successes. It's about building a culture of connection and positivity.
He talks about this Losada line, right? Remind me about that.
Yeah. Research found that teams thrive when there's at least 3 positive interactions for every negative one. Below that line, performance suffers. Above it, teams excel.
So it's not about pretending everything's perfect. It's about intentionally creating a positive environment.
Right, where people feel supported, valued.
Yeah.
And it starts with each of us. By living these principles, we become positive influencers, creating a ripple effect.
Like the butterfly effect, right?
Yeah.
Small changes can have big impact.
Exactly. And that brings us to another key piece, the power of habit.
Oh, habits. Always trying to improve mine, but it can be tough.
Achor points out, our brains automate behavior, which is actually efficient, frees up mental energy. The key is making those habits work for us, not against us.
Easier said than done sometimes. How do we change those ingrained habits?
Achor draws on William James, the father of modern psychology. James talked about daily streaks of effort for forming new habits, consistency, repetition, training our brains.
So small steps consistently, rather than trying to overhaul everything at once.
Right. And Achor highlights a key point. Habit formation is about making our nervous system our ally, not our enemy. Less pressure to force change overnight.
I love that reframing. Makes it less daunting. But what about that initial resistance to new habits?
Achor reminds us, willpower is limited. Can't rely on that alone. Hence the 20-second rule.
Ah, yes. Make good habits easy, bad ones harder, right? Reduce that initial hurdle.
He tells this story about wanting to play guitar more. Kept it in the closet, extra effort to get it out. Those seconds were enough to derail him.
So he made it more accessible, reduced the friction. Did it work?
Totally. Just moving the guitar out made him pick it up more often. And he applied the same to bad habits, like checking email constantly.
So design the environment to support your goals, whatever they are.
Exactly. He even suggests things like opt-out systems, website blockers, that sort of thing.
Make the default choice the one that aligns with your goals, be it productivity, health, whatever.
And that leads to another important aspect of social investment, giving. Achor argues that helping others drives both happiness and success.
Okay, I'm in. I know helping others feels good, but how does that translate to success in a more concrete way?
He emphasizes it's not just about altruism, though that's part of it. It's recognizing our interconnectedness. Our well-being is tied to those around us. Giving creates a ripple effect, benefiting both giver and receiver.
So it's not sacrificing my own success, but realizing it's interwoven with others.
Exactly. He tells a story about volunteering with teens building a school in South Africa. Their sense of purpose, the joy they found in contributing, was powerful.
I remember that story. And he also reminds us to appreciate those who give to us, right? The people who support and inspire us.
Yes. Express gratitude to those who've made a difference. It strengthens connections, reinforces a culture of appreciation.
It's that positive feedback loop. Giving and receiving gratitude, it just keeps cycling.
And Achor highlights, giving isn't just money or time. It's offering our skills, talents, resources.
Yeah.
Finding where our passions meet the needs of others.
So figuring out what I'm good at and how that can contribute to something meaningful.
Precisely. And that sense of purpose, of making a meaningful contribution, it's a huge driver of happiness.
This reminds me of that executive he talked about who was resistant to the whole happiness focus at first.
Thought it was all about, was it saving dolphins? Not practical business stuff.
Right. But Achor helped him see that happiness and success aren't at odds. It's about alignment.
When we feel purpose, we're more engaged, motivated, and that leads to achievement. He asks us, what ripple am I creating? How can I use my strengths for positive impact?
It's a shift from just me, to realizing we're part of something bigger, capable of positive change.
And that ties into Achor's last principle, the power of meaning. Finding meaning in our work, our lives, it's essential for lasting happiness.
Okay, let's talk meaning. We all want it, but it can feel elusive sometimes. How does Achor define it in this context?
He emphasizes, meaning isn't something we just find out there, we create it.
Yeah.
Connecting our work, our lives, to something bigger than ourselves.
So it doesn't require a glamorous job or huge ambition. It's finding the deeper WHY in what we do, no matter what it is.
Exactly. He asks, why am I doing this? What impact am I making? How does this contribute to something larger?
Aligning our work with our values, right? A job that not only pays the bills, but lets us express ourselves, make a difference.
That sweet spot where passions, skills, and values intersect. And when we find meaning in our work, we're more engaged, more resilient to challenges.
It's not work-life balance, it's work-life integration, weaving our values into everything.
And Achor points out, Meaning isn't just about work. Relationships, hobbies, our communities, our contributions, it's all part of it.
It's not just what we do, it's WHO we are, how we connect with the world around us.
He encourages us. Explore your interests, cultivate passions. You see your talents to make an impact. He tells this story about a woman who hated her job, felt totally trapped.
And he helped her create a more meaningful life.
Exactly.
Yeah.
She identified her passions, explored new opportunities, brought her values into her work, found a new job that let her be creative, connect with others, make a difference.
So powerful. We have the ability to create that meaning, but it takes a shift in perspective, a willingness to explore those possibilities.
Achor's message is, meaning isn't something we stumble upon, it's cultivated. It's a journey, discovering new ways to connect, to contribute, to create a legacy reflecting our values.
It's like we've been given this incredible toolkit for building a happier, more successful, more meaningful life. And the best part is, it's not just about us. It's about creating a ripple effect that touches everyone around us.
Exactly. So as we wrap up our deep dive into Ojedo Harvard de Ser Feliz, I want to leave you with this question. Knowing that your happiness can impact not only your own success, but the success of those around you, what small shift will you make today to cultivate a more positive and fulfilling life?
That's a great question for all of us to ponder. And if you're looking for inspiration and guidance, I highly